Hi you guys, and welcome to my YouTube channel. This recipe today is of lobster and shrimp bisque, and it's a pretty long video. It's a lot of steps, but I don't want you to be intimidated by it because it's really like one of those restaurant quality meals that I'm going to teach you guys how to make at home. And it's so amazing, and it's simple ingredients, and it's such an elevated recipe. So this is one to keep in the arsenals for those special occasions, and let's get started. So let me first start. I have Ziploc bags here of old lobster tails and old shrimp shells. The key to a good lobster is saving those old shells. I freeze them because they do need to be frozen to be technically held and not go bad. But I take some old shrimp, old lobster shells, and I save them every single time and put them in the freezer for days like this where it brains and I want to make a bisque. So you're pretty much at this point making a seafood stock with carrots, onions, celery, garlic, some fresh thyme, and I put in some tarragon in here, added in some water, and boiled those shells with some Old Bay, a little bit of salt, a little heat. You can put in a little cayenne pepper, your choice. All right, so now we're going to get to the actual bisque part of this recipe. So fine dice an onion. We're going to shave down a carrot, and we're going to fine dice that as well, which is called our mirepoix. This is the base kind of any nice stock or soup, and basically that's what we're making, a nice creamy lobster bisque. And so we're fine dicing the carrots. We fine dice the celery as well, which is coming up shortly here. And we're going to get that sweated out in a saute pan with garlic, of course. And garlic is in everything, and you can adjust however you like accordingly. I always like to add a lot of garlic. And so basically we're going to get a saute pan here, and we're going to saute and sweat out these vegetables. This is my favorite garlic press where I'm pressing my garlic. I will link it below as always in the description post the recipe, as well as the knife that I use as well will be also linked, and the pots I use also. Now for this recipe, I have a lot of lobster tails. This is not required, and if you don't have old lobster tails for your recipe, you are able to use fresh lobster tails, where you can saute the lobster first, remove the meat from the shells, and use those shells for your stock, where you basically cook the lobster but keep the shells and then start your stock after you cook the lobster. I already had saved lobster. These tails will be now saved for my next lobster bisque whenever I make that in the future. But basically I got a few tablespoons of butter, a little drizzle of olive oil, got some minced garlic, seasoned with salt and pepper, some Old Bay, and some Slap Your Mama seasoning. And then I just sauteed these until they turn pink. You don't want to overcook your lobster because that's when it becomes chewy. Just as they turn pink, let them go a minute or two longer after they're fully pink. That's how they look when they're fully cooked. And then you want to get those removed from the pan. Keep that same goodness at the bottom, and we're going to add in our shrimp. We don't really need to season it anymore because it's already in that seasoned butter and oil. And I had some lobster claw meat, so I added it right on here into this and kind of sauteed that with those flavors to get that seasoned. And then I got those removed out of the pan. That only takes a few minutes. So with the remaining pan drippings, this is where I add in my carrots, my onions, my celery, and my garlic. And again, we get those sweated out so that those are soft and cooked. And then we are going to season every layer from here going forward. So we're seasoning our vegetables with our salt and pepper. I added in some dried tarragon. If you have fresh, definitely use fresh over dried, your choice. I also added in some fresh thyme, which is our aromatics. Get those flavors open, and added into our base of our lobster bisque. Then we're going to get some tomato paste. With lobster bisque, it does have a tomato foundation in there with that cream, and you pretty much are sauteing your base with your tomato paste. And then we're going to get some flour because this will be our thickening agent for our base of our soup. So I probably added in a tablespoon or two based on how much you're making. I made a pretty large pot. I think I added 2 tablespoons here, and you're just getting that incorporated in so you don't see the flour anymore. Now, a good lobster bisque does require a sherry or white wine. I did use a sherry wine here where I deglazed my pan. I did about 1.5 cups. And then we kind of just work that in where the flour gets incorporated with the tomato paste and your veggies, and it starts to loosen up, and you will let this simmer for a few minutes, continuing to mix until you actually see it starts to thicken up here. So it becomes really thick, and you want that thickness to it because that will be your foundation of thickening your lobster bisque. And seeing now here, we have taken all the shells, all the celery, the carrots, and things from our broth. That seafood broth you can make separate for any seafood-based soup or stews. I added in our tomato base with the vegetables in this, and just mix it here. And that's where you're going to be building your bisque. And I did add in some fresh lobster, a few of those tails that I had, because I want that lobster flavor to be very prominent here. I used an emulsifier and blended it down to it was fully smooth. Then I am adding in a cup of heavy cream because we want our bisque to have a very rich and creamy feel. So then I simmered and allow that to thicken a bit more. That will add a little bit of thickness also. Okay, so now if your lobster bisque is not as thick as you'd like it to be, some people like theirs a little thinner, some people like theirs a bit thicker, you can do what's called a slurry. A slurry is taking about a tablespoon of cornstarch with about a cup of your broth that you're cooking, giving that a good whisk to incorporate the cornstarch in the mix of that broth or soup, and then adding it back into the pot, mixing it in well, and that will thicken your soup a bit more as well. So now it's time to serve up in plate, where I remove the lobster out of its shell, making sure to reserve the shells and freeze those for next time. Add in our lobster and our shrimp. I used a bit of heavy cream, just about a teaspoon on a regular spoon, and drizzled around there so we can get a nice little cute presentation going. And I put some fresh chives on top to finish it off with the garnishing. So that's a pretty easy finishing for this beautiful lobster bisque. You can make your restaurant quality meal at home. I hope you guys enjoy this recipe as much as I did, and as much as my man does, because it's one of his favorites. I should be making it a lot more often, which I will try, but I finally written out the recipe, and I hope you guys enjoy it. And as always, thank you all for watching.